Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all creatures great and small. It's time for another episode of the No Feet Survival Guide. I am your host, Mike. I go by Mike to the Y. Why? Because today we're doing a very special anniversary for myself, yours truly. So glad to have you aboard here. Once again, thank you for the downloads. It's growing slowly but surely, so hopefully we can get things going in the right direction as we continue on this journey together. And as always, unfiltered, uncensored, no producer, no editor. It is just a boy and his microphone. So hopefully, if I don't bore too many people to tears, I can give a little inspiration, a little encouragement to everyone out there who's feeling a little bit down, who's thinking they can't make it through life's challenges and what have you. Because I have been through it all, my friends. I'm a double amputee, and also for today's subject, we will be going over my kidney transplant, which on December 27th, I celebrate 10 years of having a new kidney. So it's been an amazing journey, and I have done this in a previous episode, so we're just going to kind of re-emphasize the story. We're going to focus exclusively on this, so pardon me, I gotta take a sip here of the lovely beverage. Okay. Hopefully my throat is all cleared up, but hope everybody had a fantastic Christmas. I know I did. We celebrated with an Italian cuisine for my Italian family, or mostly Italian family. And we had Chinese party poppers. We had Chinese party poppers that contained a kazoo. And I should have brought that with me. But in that was also a Christmas tune. We had to kazoo our way through the song to see if anybody else in the family guessed it. And once we got through that, we were doing disco songs, we were doing heavy metal songs, 80s hair band songs. I mean, it was a whole gamut. We were laughing our butts off and just having a great time. So, had a very good Christmas. Hope all of you had a Merry Christmas as well. And as we're in between Christmas and New Year's, I wish everybody a Happy New Year, or in the words of Eddie Murphy, Merry New Year! Ha 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 ha! Thank you for correcting my English. Ha 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 ha! Okay, that's enough of the impersonations, at least for now. So, as always, leave your comments to miketothey@gmail.com. Put no feet as the subject. That's MIKETOTHE and the letter Y. Yes, it looks like Mike to they, but it's Mike to the Y. So make sure you pronounce it correctly when you do send me an email, if and when you send me an email. Love to hear your comments, good, bad, indifferent. You know, again, it's a boy and his microphone, so I'm just sitting here spieling away. So, on December 27th of 2015, I had a kidney transplant surgery, and it's been all uphill or downhill, depending on your point of view, ever since. So, I decided to go over the whole story of one of my kidney failure, and two, the process of getting the transplant. because I know that when I had mine, the average wait time at the Ohio State University was 2 years. It took me 2 years and 1 month to get the transplant. Now, having said that, my understanding is that the national average right now for the waiting list is 7 years. So, not only will I emphasize my story and what I went through, but also to encourage anyone out there, no matter where you're at, to be an organ donor. And it doesn't even, and one of the things I found out being an ambassador for uh, the organ donor campaign, or whatever you want to call it. So, but just to encourage people, just take a minute when you get your license renewed, or you can go down to the B&B if you're not due yet. Let them know you want to be an organ donor. And thank you to all who are organ donors. So, the story culminates in 2015. Well, actually, the story culminates today because I'm beating the national average of 7 years. But we need to go back to the year 2013. Unbelievably, 12 years ago. And I don't know where the time went, so ask yourself that question. Hopefully you come up with a better answer than I do. But anyway, at the time, it was November of 2013, and actually I'll go back a little bit further to summer of 2013. I did a musical production in community theater of 1776, which was an absolute blast to do, and I'm still connected with several of the castmates and directors and whatnot today. But that's kind of when everything started to snowball in the middle of summer, and at work I walked about a block to get to the bus stop because it was convenient, and I only had to drive a mile to the park and ride and take the bus into work downtown. But getting to that block, I was just getting tired walking a few feet. And I mean, I literally had to rest halfway through walking 1 block to get my wind back and then get things going again. And for those who have not experienced renal failure or kidney failure, it's pretty much like a weight at the base, at the base of the top of your legs. It's just such a heavy thing, and I was gaining weight, and yeah, my balls were swelling up, and that was going in the middle of doing work, one, and then two, in the middle of a musical production where I was just running out of breath after taking like 10 steps or what have you. So, it was an excruciating experience, to say the least, especially when you have to move around. You do a couple little dances for 1776, nothing too traumatic for this non-dancer, but getting your lines out, being in the right place at the right time, yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I don't know if it ever really showed during the production. I'll have to leave that judgment up to other people, but yeah, it was tough. And then the production ended and things kept getting worse and worse, and at that time I was holding down a second job. So I was working for the state of Ohio as my day job, and then at night I was working at the Abercrombie and Fitch call center. helping out people from all lands. So I was truly a worldwide customer service rep at that time. But yeah, it was a struggle just getting from the day job to the night job, where I was working 5 or 6 hours, depending on how fast things were going. But yeah, it ended up being a struggle. And from probably the end of July till November, and again, this is the dumbbell that I am to myself and worried about helping others and helping myself, it got worse and worse. So, right around Veterans Day in November of 2013, I could barely pee, do a number one, and it just felt like I was ready to burst out, and nothing was coming out. And it was basically at that point that I decided to take myself to the ER at a place called Doctor's Hospital. And they basically got me in the waiting room, got me the exam, and said, yeah, man, you got stage 4 renal failure. So I was down to close to single digits. And stage 5, it's almost no recovery for that, as far as I can tell. But I had stage 4, so I was right on the precipice of beaming out. So they kept me at the hospital for probably about a week or so, got me through dialysis, dropped all that weight, felt a whole lot better. But then it was a question of having to do dialysis 3 times a week. And for anybody who has done dialysis or has known somebody who has done dialysis, trust me, it's not as fun as you think it is. So I basically went with a place that was within walking distance of where I was working at my day job. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I can't do the night job anymore. So I spent a couple years there and, made some decent money. And it was tiring from a couple standpoints that I was trying to still do musical theater. Moving Blessed Michael McGivney in. Yeah, it was hampering on doing community theater, which I had loved for good 13 or 15 years from at that point. And just tiring, even working the semi-full shift, which was for me again 5 or 6 hours. So having dropped that, I ended up doing dialysis, even though it cut a little bit into the daytime job time. Usually about 15 minutes or so I would end up losing or putting in sick time or what have you. So walk to the dialysis place, do my 4 hours, which was usually 4:30 to 8:30, and then I would walk back to the bus stop. Now, yes, I know for those who've been through dialysis, you're asking yourself, why are you walking from a dialysis place to the bus stop when you should have gotten some sort of transportation to and from? And the answer to that is Mike to the Y is stubborn. So I would drive my mile to the bus stop, take the bus, go do the day job, and then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, skate out about 15 minutes early so I could walk over to the dialysis place, get my 4 hours, lose about 10 pounds in roughly those 4 hours. So yeah, if you've ever lost 10 pounds in that amount of time, you can imagine you're feeling pretty drained. So And luckily for me, taking the bus all the way home, which was about a 45-minute drive, a little quicker than that because usually there weren't a whole lot of people on the bus by that point. But there were people on the bus. You had to make stops. You had to make a couple pickups here and there. Yeah, it was about a 45-minute ride home. And believe me, it was draining to the point where, one, I could almost feel myself black out. And then two, I would get, since I hadn't really eaten anything since lunch, I would kind of get these dry heaves and, not every time, but it probably at least once every other week. And maybe a little more often than that. But yeah, that's what I ended up enduring for the first year or so. And then I ended up saying, well, actually, the doctor said, okay, you're ready to get on the transplant list. We're going to make it retroactive to when you started dialysis so that, you're kind of pushed up the list, as it were, as opposed to being brand spanking new. They put you at the bottom of the list and work your way up. So, getting tested to be eligible for the transplant ended up being very interesting from the standpoint that for those who've been to the hospital, you get those vials where they take your blood, go sample it out for different things. Folks, they took out 15 vials at one time to get me all tested to make sure I was eligible for kidney transplant. So let me tell you, that was probably 10 times worse than going through 4 hours of dialysis, because it feels like you don't have a drop of blood left in you, but obviously you do. But it was draining and straining and everything else you can imagine. Now, one fascinating thing I did find out about that was my blood type is AB positive, which is the second rarest type of blood you can have. Now, later, after my transplant and all that, I was watching a documentary on the Shroud of Turin, and it turns out that the image on there, and again, if you're a believer, and I do believe that the Shroud of Turin is the casting of Jesus on the shroud, the blood type was AB positive, which is my blood type. So you can insert a joke here. You can take whatever you want out of it. I get to brag that I got the same blood type as Jesus, okay? So I am far from perfect. I am definitely not Jesus, but I got the same blood type. So that was pretty cool. And one thing you find out about your blood type is me having an AB blood type. I can take any blood type kidney. So, in other words, pardon me, for those who have blood type O, that's the most common, about half the population has a blood type O. You can only take an O blood type kidney as from a donor. If you are type A, which is the second most common, you could take O and A. If you have B, you could take O, A, and B. And as an AB, such as myself, I could take O, A, B, or AB. I could get any of those blood types. Now, obviously, having the same blood type is going to be more beneficial to you, but obviously, if someone is in super dire need of a kidney like that and they have a blood type AB, they're going to go and try and match that up as quickly as possible. So, having said that, they basically just told me, yeah, keep doing your dialysis and, the waiting game begins. So, I was told by the Ohio State University that their they beat the average time for being on the waiting list for organ donation. They are at 2 years. At least at the time, they were at 2 years. You know, what it is now, I couldn't tell you. But again, the national average, I believe, is around 6 or 7 years. Somebody can correct me on that. But, yeah, that's when you're going through dialysis. And the more you go through dialysis, the more brittle your bones get. Because they're basically draining 10 pounds off you during those 4 hours, and it takes a toll on the body. That's a long time. And again, that is why I will encourage you at the end to be an organ donor. So, I went through another year of dialysis, day job, went to the dialysis clinic, caught the bus, went home. And again, that went on for a good another year after being put on the transplant list, retroactive. So, November 2013 is when I started dialysis. Now we fast forward to December of 2015, and this was on Christmas, I believe, was on a Friday. So, December 26th, I'd just gotten my paycheck, so I says to myself, let's go grocery shopping. Had a leather jacket on, of course it's December in Columbus, Ohio, chilly, and had my phone in my inside pocket. Went to Walmart. Did all my shopping there, got most everything I wanted. And then I get to Aldi. Get most of my shopping there. I'm ready to check out. And I hear my phone ring. And it's my sister. My sister being my emergency contact. I go, hey, what's up, sis? She goes, Ohio State has been trying to call you for the past hour, right? I was like, huh? So I looked at my recent calls, and sure enough, there were 2 calls placed from Ohio State. I go, I'll call you right back. So, checked out Aldi, got into my car, dialed up Ohio State, and they go, yes, we may have found a match for you. Now, just to let you know, we've got to do some extra testing, but we will try and let you know today. That is Saturday the 26th. It was about noonish or so, maybe 11:30, but just about to hit afternoon. So I knew any kind of surgery, you gotta not eat for 24 or 48 hours or whatever, unlike what Kramer says on Seinfeld. You need your strength. But I was like, okay, 12 o'clock, I'm not going to eat anything. I'm sure the call's going to come within an hour or so. No. The call finally came about 6 p.m., hadn't eaten a morsel of food. And they go, okay, we're almost sure it's a match. So come on in, get yourself checked in, and we'll go from there. So ended up having my brother come over, pick me up, take me to the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. Got myself checked in, got my room. Well, and it turned out that the donor who had passed away in a motorcycle accident, and thank goodness he was a donor and was a young person, I believe in his 20s. They had to do a couple extra checks for hepatitis because, unfortunately, the donor had been in jail at some point. At least one point. So, had to be extra sure. So, stayed overnight. It became Sunday the 27th. Right around 9 a.m., they said, okay, it is a match. It is cleared. You're going to head down for surgery right around noonish or so. So, noonish came by, and they hadn't wheeled me down yet. So probably about 1 o'clock, they finally got me. Somebody might have had some sort of over complication with their transplant surgery, because this was a specified surgeon who had done this. So got down there about 1 o'clock. They told me, yep, the surgery's going to take about 4 hours, and then you start your recovery time, and we'll test the kidney out as they go while you're in the hospital, etc., etc. Now, and I'm not sure if I told this in the original podcast that I did, but at some point, obviously you go through the anesthesia countdown from 100. 100, 99. So out by 98. So at some point, I had this very vivid dream. I mean, it was as realistic as you can get, and I had no idea. I couldn't have told you a week after the surgery what that dream was. But it just seemed very, very real. So, obviously I was still down in recovery downstairs from the surgical room. And I stood up. I mean, I didn't stand upright. I laid upright like a shot. I was laying flat. Then I was at a 90-degree angle like a shot. And all the nurses there and all the personnel were ready to strap me down because they thought I was going to be running off, even though I still had one good leg. And what am I going to do? Hop out of there? But they were ready to restrain me, needless to say. And I was like, it took me a couple seconds to realize where I was at. And I was like, wow. I think I told the nurses there that I just had this wild dream that just seemed very real, and that's why I shot up like that. And, obviously, the nurses are kind of giggling about it. Wasn't funny at the time, but, hey, good giggle. So, everything went well. And, of course, you get the catheter in that very important place, and once again, not as fun as it sounds, but I could kind of feel myself tinkling every once in a while, like little short spurts of it. So again, not to be to gross you out or anything, but I'm trying to relay the experience for you. So they basically kept an eye on me, and I was doing well, and New Year's rolls around, and I'm stuck in the hospital. So it's getting down to 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and, obviously at that point, Dick Clark was gone. I think Ryan Seacrest was hosting the thing, and I was like, Seacrest is okay, but it's not New Year's Eve without Dick Clark. So I decided to skip that and start. You get that little fun remote there with the cord and the big knobs on it, getting to your cable channels. I landed on Sci-Fi Channel, and they were running old Twilight Zone episodes. I was like, okay, I can watch this. I haven't seen Twilight Zone in a while, so ended up spending past midnight watching Twilight Zone episodes. You could hear the nurses cheering in the back for Happy New Year, etc., etc. And finally conked out about 1 o'clock. And now that is my new New Year's Eve tradition. Minus tomorrow night, Wednesday, New Year's Eve, I will be watching Ohio State and Miami of Florida at 7:30. Go Bucks, OH, Ohio. That should take me hopefully to about 10:30 or 11 o'clock. Then I can start watching Twilight Zone episodes. And funny thing about that is I've been binging on some of it on certain days on Pluto TV. They have a whole Twilight Zone channel. So You can watch like 4 or 5, you can watch 24 hours of it if you really wanted to. But you see 4 or 5 episodes at a time. You see ones you haven't seen. You see ones that you've seen already. But I recommend anybody who hasn't seen the original Twilight Zone episodes, watch these episodes. You would be amazed at how prophetic Rod Serling became back in the 60s on stuff that's happened today or has happened throughout the 70s or 80s or even 90s, or the 2000s for that matter. But anyway, that's my New Year's tradition, watching Twilight Zone. So, fell asleep. I was good enough to be released at the end of the Ohio State Notre Dame game in the Fiesta Bowl in 2016. So, basically, I spent less than a week getting my surgery and then getting out of there. And, just as an aside, they pulled my catheter out, I believe, on the 30th. And the first thing I did was put my street clothes on. There was a Wendy's in the basement of Ohio State Hospital. I went and got me a couple junior bacon cheeseburgers, and yeah, I was a happy camper then. Luckily, the food has improved tremendously at Ohio State. I wouldn't eat it every day, but, at least they're improved. So, anyway, got my Wendy's. But January 1st, got out. And that started my recovery time, which ended up being about 2 months. So, a shout out to my caregiver, one of my dear theater friends, Cindy Emmer, who lives in Cincinnati, but made the commitment to come up and take care of me, because one, I couldn't drive, which drove me absolutely nuts. And two, to make sure I was taking my anti-rejection medicines, all the pills I was taking, which, yeah, again, taking 9 pills at once. Cindy was amazed by it, and she's taken care of a couple of our other friends, and she was like, "You're the easiest patient I've ever had," because I've had to, beg, yell, cajole my other friend to make sure they're taking their pills every day, and I was just doing it like clockwork, and took all 14 pills at once, or 12 pills, or whatever it was. And that was that. And I was in recovery for 2 months, and I finally went back to work in March, which kind of surprised a lot of people, because I had one coworker who told me, "Oh yeah, I know somebody who had a kidney transplant, and they were out for a year." And when they told me that before the surgery happened, I was like, "Oh, hells no, that ain't happening." Yeah, I got sick of Jerry Springer and who the baby daddy is and all that other nonsense that happens in the late morning, early afternoon. So, 2 months to recover, and like I said, it's uphill or downhill, whichever way you want to look at it since. And, of course, about 5 years later, I ended up having my right leg amputated because, again, I wasn't taking care of myself. Still not to some degree, but I'm doing my best here. I've lost some weight this year, actually. I'm down about 40 pounds, so if you see me in the Podfest from January, you'll notice a difference. So I'm feeling better from that standpoint, so I am grateful for that. And this is one of the reasons why I've decided to do a podcast like this. More of a catharsis for me to let everybody know what I've been through, and that you can't let yourself down. In other words, getting a transplant can seem like an ending for you, where you could be bedridden, you could be, going through dialysis for how many years, but each time both of my amputations, which were about 11 years apart, my kidney transplant, which was pretty much smack dab in between, and all the other challenges that I faced, I feel I've come out on the better end of it. And for those of you who are going through dialysis now or having certain challenges with your diabetes or any health issue that you may have. I mean, I know people who've gone through cancer 3 times and they've recovered each time, and it seemed like it's not going well for them each time they defeat it, that, what's going to happen next. All I can tell you is do your best now, and whatever happens next, happens next. So, basically, if you take care of yourself, make sure you're taking care of other people, because that's part of the process of taking care of yourself, is making sure others who are in a similar spot, or who are in a similar light, have that encouragement. Hey, you're gonna make this. You got this. You're gonna knock this out of the park, however you want to put it. But I'm so grateful to those who, well, one, I'm grateful to those at Ohio State who, through the testing process, through the pre-surgery, through the surgery, through the post-surgery, making sure everything's running well. Everything is running well, by the way. So, and one thing I do want to do before I head out is to once again reach out to the family of the donor, just to give a little recap on that. About April of 2016, I had written a note to the people at Donate Life because they had access to the donor and the donor's family and what have you. And I wrote a 4-page letter to them expressing my gratitude to the young man who had passed away and who selflessly had given organs. And I'm sure there's some other recipients out there. I have not heard from this family in 10 years. I have never heard from them, to be quite frank. But I'd like to reach out to you now. Thank yous can never be enough. I'm so grateful for the gift that was given. And I know it was not given in the best of circumstances. In fact, it's probably the most horrible of circumstances. But just for him being an organ donor, I'm sitting here today going on and hopefully not boring people to death about the sacrifice that was given. So, again, it kind of blanked on me for a second, but the organization is Donate Life. I'm specifically with Donate Life of Ohio. You would have to look up the particular state's donation program, but you can do the simplest of things to be an organ donor. If you have a driver's license, if you have an ID, make sure that you have that little heart on the card to be an organ donor. When you renew, make sure you're an organ donor. I encourage every last person to do it because, again, there are people who are on the waiting list that are not as fortunate or as blessed as I. And your gift can potentially help 8 people. Because there's 8 things that can be donated: eye, skin, kidney, liver, heart, and the others I blank on. But this is a great opportunity to give. And I encourage everyone out there who is listening to please give. It's the greatest gift you can give. So I want to thank you guys for listening. Hopefully I haven't droned on and on, but I try and tell a good story. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. By the way, I would say about 95% of it is factual. I might have leaned on a couple of details, but the general facts are nothing but the truth, my friends. So again, thank you for listening. I will be back next week to drop another podcast. Once again, thank you for downloading. I am technically a worldwide downloaded podcaster. So, except for Antarctica, those dang penguins are just really stubborn about their podcasting, I suppose. But, once again, thank you so much for listening in. I will be back next week, hopefully with it'll be a slightly lighter subject, but I had a wonderful experience on this past Sunday that I want to share with you. So please tune in. Thank you again for listening. Remember, my email is Mike to the Y, MIKETOTHE, the letter Y, at gmail.com. If it helps you remember, Mike to they at gmail.com. Put the subject no feet. If you have any comments, suggestions, hey, you stink, get off the air, you jerk. Or, hey, you touched me. I know somebody who is going through what you've been through, and I'm going to have them listen. And hopefully what I say, if it helps one person, mission accomplished. So, but I hope I help many of you out there who are going through any sort of physical or mental or psychological challenge, that keep your chin up, my friends. I believe if I can go through all this and come out, you can do the same thing. So thank you guys. Have a good night.